Welcome to another episode of the Cool Tool Show and Tell. Our special guest this week is Asa Hillis. Asa, would you introduce yourself to?
Yep. Hi. Hi, Kevin. My name's Asa Hillis. As you said, I'm a furniture maker based in Silicon Valley. I specialize in woodworking and metalworking, and I strive to make pieces that are one-off and timeless, and that'll stand the test of time.
And you are speak to us from your workshop.
Yep. This is Behind the Tech Labs. It's a shop I manage in Los Gatos.
Okay. And for those who are seeing things, it looks like a really cool shop with some hand planes in the back and a drill press. So
Yep.
I'm sure you'll have some really great tools for us, Asa. So, so tell us about one of your favorite tools, number one on the list.
Okay, number one on my list is this. It's a Wixey digital angle gauge. It's a pretty small piece. It's about 2 3/8 by 2 3/8 by 1 inch.
Right.
You can get it on Amazon right now for around $28.
Right.
And it does one simple thing, and it is tell you an angle. So this Wixey gauge lives on my table saw, so I can put my blade to whatever angle I want easily.
Right.
So I can go ahead, turn it on, zero it off to the cast iron of the table saw, and then when I tilt the blade, it reads out. Right. And it's got a fairly good accuracy of, a tenth of a percent.
Wow.
Or a tenth of a degree.
Tenth of a degree.
So,
okay. Yeah.
A degree. Yeah.
And does it have a magnet on the bottom?
Yeah, so it does have a magnet, so it works well with any cast iron, any steel in your shop. Right. If you want to use it on something that isn't steel or magnetic, you can use double stick tape, or you can do a cool trick with 2 pieces of blue tape and some super glue.
Right.
So in essence, it can turn anything or add a digital readout to anything in the shop. Yeah.
So I could imagine, like, if you're trying to cut something at an angle, that'd be useful. But are there other use cases that you find yourself using this thing for, besides, say, cutting a blade or cutting a piece of stock at a slight angle?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ones. So the primary use, as I said, is cutting angles on the table saw. Right. But if I want to sharpen a gouge on a bench top grinder, I can go ahead and magnetize it to my gouge and set whatever angle I want and visually keep it, or even set up a jig. And I know exactly what angle that is without having to fuss with any other kind of gauge to say what angle it is to a round object.
Okay, that's cool. All right.
Could get pretty complicated.
For sharpening, yeah.
Right. And you can use it to sharpen hand plane blades as well. Just magnetize it to the blade, set your angle. You make a simple block jig that holds it at that angle you've set, and go to town on your honing stones.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And this one that you're suggesting, are there others that are similar and this is just superior, or is this sort of a case where there's lots of generic ones out there all about the same?
I wouldn't say this one's superior. I would say they're all about the same. Okay. They're all around the $30 range. They're all around the same accuracy level. I'm sure you could find one that's far more expensive that has better accuracy, but for my needs in the shop, it's perfectly fine.
Right.
When I do set my blade on the table saw, say I want to do a 45-degree angle, I'll set my my angle to 45 degrees with a Wixey, do a test cut, flip that test cut, and then measure it for square. And by flipping it, you magnify any error in your cut. So you can tell, okay, I'm really close to 45 degrees. It says 45 degrees, but I need to adjust it by a hair. Mm-hmm. So you can get really close and then fine tune it.
Right. And are there any other tricks that you've learned in using one of these over time? You just mentioned one, which is like flipping it.
Right.
So in the old days, how did they do it? And also, I was just wondering if you have any idea how the actual gizmo works.
Yeah, it's got a capacitive rotary encoder inside of it with a pendulum.
Okay, so it's something's
Yeah,
hanging down.
something's physically hanging down and it's
Okay.
measuring the tilt angle.
Does that make it sort of sensitive to being dropped
Yep.
and stuff?
Uh, Sensitive to being dropped, sensitive to moisture. Um, so yeah, it does have some limitations there, but it's nice that you can re-zero it.
Okay.
I've gone through about two or three of them over the years. They do have a shelf life.
Okay. In
Yep.
terms of just getting banged around or
Getting banged around. I had one below my table saw, and when I tilted the blade, somehow it got pinched between the wheel on the table saw, and that
okay.
one was toast. So
Yeah.
you
Right.
find a way to break them occasionally.
Okay.
And
So
going back to your question about in the old days before you had this, how would you do it? You would use something called a bevel gauge, which is two parallel pieces of metal that have a point that they rotate against. So you can adjust whatever angle, put it up against something, and say, okay, this is that angle. And you can go and reference it with a
okay.
protractor
All
or
right.
something of that sort.
Right. Okay. So you'd have to measure it to a reference.
Yep.
Not at all as easy as this little digital readout for sure.
Yep. For sure.
Um, and so that's a really great. It's a great tool. I can see why that would be really handy. So Asa, what's a second tool that you really like?
So my second tool is my Surge Leatherman. This
Okay.
here, it's a one of the biggest ones they offer. I think there's two that are around the same size. It weighs about 3/4 of a pound. It's pretty hefty. 4.5 inches by by 1 3/4 by about 3/4 of an inch.
Right.
So you feel it in your pocket, you feel it on your belt. Um, and this one, it's pricey. It's about $150,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll have it for a long time.
If
And
you don't use it, right.
and Leatherman, yeah, unless you lose it. And
Right.
Leatherman offers an awesome 25-year warranty, which I've taken advantage of too.
Right.
So something breaks, you just send it to them, and they'll fix it and send it right back your way, or
So
replace it
they
if
actually
it's
fix
not.
it rather than replace it. They'll just fix it.
Yep, there. If I recall correctly, on the website there was a little button you can push that says, "If they can't fix it, send back the same knife."
Right.
Because a lot of people develop kind of a love of their
Right. Right.
tools. It's sentimental.
So this Leatherman is like lots of Leathermans. It has folding legs, two folding legs that form the handle for pliers, and
Right,
but I've seen a lot of the ones these days where they're trying to make them as small as possible. This goes the
right,
other way,
right.
making it as big as possible. Why are you gravitating to one that's as big as possible?
Two reasons why I really, really like this one. The main reason is it's got interchangeable bits. So here you can change a bit, you can rotate it, and then I also have a full collection of all the other bits I could
Right.
need, like a
And
T6 bit or
what you're
square drive bit.
right, what you're showing is at the end of the handle is a little flip up socket that
Hmm.
holds like a driver bit, like a Phillips
Right,
or a flat
right.
head or Torx, and then you can swap out, so you can use it like a screwdriver.
A regular screwdriver. And then also they offer an extension shaft that fits into this
Right,
rectangular
right,
slot. And then on the end of the shaft, you can use the same bits that come with it,
right, right,
or it also works with traditional
right.
1/4 inch
Right.
bits. So
But
in that case, you open up the world of
right,
all the bits.
but you are sitting in a workshop where you must have dozens of screwdrivers all around you. What's the advantage of having this multi-tool?
If I'm working on something and I'm doing a lot of square drive uh, screws, and I'll put a square drive bit in there, keep it in my pocket. Say I'm underneath a piece of furniture and I want to tighten a screw. I don't have to get up, go find my screwdriver. I've got it right on my pocket. Um, so that's a primary thing. Another thing that's awesome about this particular one is it's got interchangeable blades. So it's just a regular jigsaw blade that
Hmm.
can pop into here. So you don't have to worry about being precious with your blade. It's not integrated into the tool. So I use this for wood. I've used it for drywall projects. And
Mhm.
as soon as it gets dull, I can just pop it out and swap it and I'm good to go.
Okay.
So there's still some drywall residue on this right now.
And there seem to be two philosophies about Leathermans and big multi-tools like this.
Hmm.
You're either a pocket or in a case.
Yep.
Something like this is in your pocket, you're going to notice it.
Hmm. Yep. So I normally keep it in a leather case on my belt.
Built, right.
Um, the reason why I use leather is uh, when I get into the car, this is pretty bulky. So I like to remove it from the leather pouch and put it in the console, and I don't know it's there. They do make other sheaths that are quick sheaths that you can just, it's a metal box that it's stored into, and you can just slide it right out,
Mhm.
which is great. But once you sit down, you feel that on your side.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something like this big is you really can't carry it in your pocket. You really should have it sheathed somewhere.
Yeah, it's a commitment to carry.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
yeah, and you wouldn't want this bouncing around in your pocket with your cell phone.
Yeah.
Your screen will end up cracked. So,
Not to mention your pocket will just wear through and it'll slip
oh
out.
yeah, for sure, for
Um,
sure.
so,
Um,
so like when you go into your workshop, you gear up with this. You have this at your
mhm.
side as a kind
Yep,
of something that's immediate at hand, rather than to actually even walk over to get a pliers or whatever.
yep, yep. And as you said, I've got my pliers on here. It's needle nose. It's got wire cutters in there. It's got a solid wire cutter, stranded wire cutter, crimper. So I've got every type of plier
Okay.
cutter I would want on that head. Great for pulling staples. Great for stripping a little wire if you're redoing outlet or something.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's got one hand open, which is great. Uh, a lot of these knives aren't one-handed. It's difficult to open it up and even more difficult to press the little button to unlock the blade to close it back down. And being able to just reach out, grab your knife, flip the blade with one hand is something that's really nice to have.
Right. And are those knife blades also changeable?
Um, I've never changed one out. The whole thing is screwed together with safety screws. So I assume if you felt so inclined, you could take it out and replace it. Um,
Or if you broke it, like say if you broke
or
it.
if you broke it,
Yeah,
I think if you broke it, it might be covered under the warranty,
I see.
or
Okay.
you send it in to get repaired.
Yeah,
Um, but I wouldn't see why you couldn't take
yeah.
it apart.
Okay. You certainly could sharpen it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
Uh, I will add though that the wire strippers, wire cutter, are easily removed with an Allen key. So if that part uh, gets broken somehow, it's easy to change.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So this is really not like a pocket knife. This is really literally like a multi-tool that's uh,
Yeah,
always near you.
yeah, and I keep a little pocket knife as well. That's great
Mm.
for cutting open little boxes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, And there are times where this doesn't live in on my side constantly because it is a commitment to carry.
Hmm.
But if I know I'm going to be really productive that day
Hmm.
and potentially need a couple of tools on here, I'll definitely wear it.
Cool. Okay. And remind me again the name of this particular tool.
It's a Surge Leatherman,
Surge
and
leather.
yep, Surge.
Hmm.
And this particular model I have is the black one, and it's held up really well. I think I've had it for about 5 years, and it looks pretty much new.
Right. Actually, it has a nice worn edges look to it.
Yep,
Patina.
yep.
Well, thank you. That's really great. Okay, so that's tool number two. So what's your third in your lineup of favorite?
So I'm progressively going up from tools and price. So this is a big jump here. We're going to the Festool
Oh.
domino, which this here is a $1,200 tool,
Yes.
but it's worth every penny if you're a furniture maker.
Okay.
So this
So,
does,
so you're holding up something that looks like, well, you can hold it in one hand as a contraption, probably at least a
yep,
foot high and maybe 7, 8 inches wide, with lots of
yep,
things going on. And it's for joining things, as you'll explain.
right. So the primary use is it bores a slot where you can put these dominoes in. So it makes a mortise and tenon joint
Right. And
in
the
a
domino
matter.
is like a little wooden oval diameter thing. It's kind of like a wooden, I don't know how you say, a wooden slot.
Uh, and oval dowel in
It's a
a way.
dowel. Yeah, it's a flattened
It's
dowel.
yeah. So and they make them in a bunch of different sizes. Here's a big one. This is not for this particular domino; it's for its big brother. Uh, and then it can go down to things as fine as this, which is 4 millimeters by 20 millimeters.
Right. So it's like a little,
So
yeah,
quite tiny.
quite
Yeah.
tiny.
Um, So, as I said, the primary use is to make mortise and tenons. So, for instance, here I've got a mortise and tenon. I put a slot on the end of one of the pieces and a slot on the side of one, put the domino in it, and then when I attach the pieces together, it creates a super strong joint.
Right. Which you glue. You glue all the pieces.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Theoretically, you couldn't do this joint without something there, whether it's a dowel, a screw, a regular mortise and tenon, because when you're gluing end grain to side grain, the glue tends to soak into the end grain like it's a bunch of straws. So your joint becomes very weak very quickly. But if you put a mortise and tenon there, it becomes super strong because you have a lot of side glue surface.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and they make attachments for it so you can do mortise and tenons into dowels, which is not something that's very easy to do by hand with
Hmm.
a
Right.
drill and a chisel.
Right.
And it takes a matter of seconds to
And
make.
but there are a number of other mortises, and this looks like one is a cordless, if I'm not mistaken.
It's corded.
It's corded. Okay. Well,
It is corded.
they make a number of others, but the Festools are known for being much more expensive. So
Yep.
what is the superiority of this brand?
I believe they've patented this domino system.
I see.
So something that's very similar would be a biscuit joiner,
Hmm.
which does a single oval biscuit. They tend to be pretty thin, maybe most eighth of an inch. And those are great for joining pieces of wood side by side, such as plywood. But they're not incredibly strong.
Hmm.
If you were to give a lot of side force, it would probably snap. Um, I haven't seen any other tools on the market that do a floating mortise and tenon quite like this.
And you just use the word floating, and what does that mean?
Floating means that there's a hole on either side, and then the piece of wood, the domino, goes
Uh,
into each of the sides, and it's technically floating within that joint. So you have the ability to move it around. It's not connected or made out of the wood of the actual piece.
I see. Versus
Yeah,
you kind of carved out
right,
of the piece itself, like you might by hand. I see. That's
right.
okay. So why wouldn't you just use dowels?
Dowels aren't the strongest joints because they don't really have side grain. They've got a very little bit, and then it goes. Well, they do have side grain, but most of it, half of the dowel is on end grain, and the other half is on grain. And it has a very little bit of side grain. So that's the primary reason, and also the domino is incredibly easy.
Mm-hmm.
When you're drilling dowels, it's pretty easy to
But
put your
you
hole.
need more than one. Getting them lined up is a problem.
Yeah, for sure. You can drive yourself crazy trying to get them all lined up. And a nice thing that the domino does is it cuts different slot sizes. So here you have an adjuster that can go from tight, which is, this is the tight one here. I would need a pair of pliers to get this out. This isn't glued in. To the next one, which gives about an 1/8 inch of slop. So now I can move that and adjust that there, and it'll be a strong joint, but I can adjust it while I'm gluing up. And if
Right.
I'm off by a little bit, it won't matter.
So it's kind of an 1/8 inch in one direction and it's still snug on the other.
So it's snug with the thickness,
Right.
but the width is what is adjusted, which the snug of the thickness is, you want that to be able to have the pieces within the same plane.
Right.
And it's pretty easy to center the cut on the piece of wood, but if it's slightly off center and you reference all your cuts from the same side, say the top side, if there's even an 1/8 of an inch difference, they're all going to be identical in the same location.
I mean, if you're doing more than one, you have a whole bunch. I see.
Right. So if I was to show you this here, if the domino was, say, almost right up to the top of this edge here, it wouldn't matter if I cut the domino on this and reference the same top edge. So I'm not worried about that height as much with referencing. So setup is super easy. There's a little slide on the side that you can set up your height, and it becomes a stop, or you can get rid of it and you can adjust it on your own. But for instance, like 25 millimeters, 1 inch, I can know that that's going to put it around center of 1 inch.
So, and do you reference that center by a measurement, or do you actually lay it onto the work surface and it figures it out?
So I lay my first one. I normally measure off my piece of wood, and I'll use a combination square and mark the end. A combo square is pretty much a square surface with a ruler that slides back and forth. So I can slide it to, say, for this 3/4 of an inch, I'll slide it to 3/8 of an inch, reference it to one side, mark it, flip it to the other side, and mark it, and I can see if there's any discrepancy. I know exactly where center is. And then with this here, with the domino, they conveniently put a little notch on the side that is dead center of the blade. So all I have to do is take my piece of wood and reference that line dead center there. So they make finding the height and the center super easy.
Right. Okay.
So I hardly use this little stop here. It's useful for some things, but most of the time it's just as easy to go ahead and mark your piece with a combination square.
Okay. Really great. So this is the Festool domino joiner or domino maker or whatever it's called.
This is called the Domino DF500. It's just referred to as the domino.
Do they make more than one variety of it, or is this?
So yeah, this is the standard size, and then they make an XL, the DF700, which I don't use it very frequently. We have it in the shop. It would be used for making bed frames, really beefy tables. But most of the fine furniture that I make, this will do the trick. And it's got interchangeable bits. So it's got a variety of different bits that are super easy to interchange. And the bit sizes go from 5 millimeters, 6 millimeters, 8 millimeters, and 10 millimeters. So you have a large range of thickness.
That's just to accommodate different thicknesses of the dominoes.
Right. Which the thicker, the stronger it is.
Right.
And then if you don't want to be limited by the physical dominoes that they sell, I've made my own dominoes with the table saw and a router table with just a little 1/4 inch round over, and it's perfect. So I've needed ones that were 2 inches wide. So I could go ahead, make those, and then I'll just put multiple domino cuts next to each other. And I can make as long of a slot as I want.
Right. That's really great. Okay, well, that's fantastic thing to know. I had never had a walkthrough on that before, so thank you. I appreciate that.
Definitely. I
Um,
would say it's one of the most used tools in furniture making, at least in my shop.
mhm,
Um, and it's an amazing time saver. You
mhm,
could make a joint in 30 seconds where it might take an hour to do it a traditional way.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and when you're trying to make furniture for a living, it's definitely useful to be able to make a precise um, mortise and tenon within seconds.
Right, right, right. Cool. Okay, great. So, Asa, your last tool. What do you have
My
for?
last tool is we're going to look at the Shaper Origin. So this is the Shaper Origin. It's what is it, about the size of a toaster?
Yeah,
For those
exactly. A
listening.
toaster or a coffee maker,
Yep.
and
And
it's got uh, some upright things, a clear front. There's a screen at the top.
there's a screen. There's a little trim router, which
Right.
happens to be made by Festool. They
Okay.
work with Shaper on the router part of this, so that's a definite plus.
So it's
And
basically looks like it is a router because it has kind of router handles on the side.
it's a very smart router.
Okay.
So it's a handheld CNC basically, which this is $3,000 give or take for the base unit. Um, and to be able to get a CNC for that price is pretty amazing. And the accuracy on this is to 100th of an inch at least.
Wow. Wow. And
So
I think the other advantage is that you have kind of unlimited size that you can
very
basically.
true. So I can go ahead and cut something super duper small, the size of a ring, or I can go ahead and do a big inlay on a floor in a living room. Uh, so to have that wide range with a CNC is pretty amazing. And the way this works is it runs off of this tape here, which kind of look like little dominoes.
Right, right.
And you
So
put
yes,
out,
so you're holding up a roll of tape, and on the tape, the pattern of the tape on one side is looks like black and white dominoes or kind of like punch
right,
card stuff, and
right.
they form different patterns. These
It
little
forms different patterns, correct. So when you roll this out on your surface, and then you can take your shaper and it's got an integrated camera and you record your surface and it can calculate, okay, I know where all these dots are and I know exactly where I am in the world now compared to these or where these dots are. So now that's useful for if you're going to do a one-off thing, you can go ahead, just lay it down, scan it, or you can make a template that you use repetitively at the shop. So, for instance, take a piece of plywood, make a little recess in it where you constantly change out pieces that you need to cut, and then put the grid tape out and scan that one work area, and then it stores that within the shaper, and then you can go back and access it. So you're not wasting tape over and over.
oh,
So
interesting.
say I make boxes and I want to engrave all my boxes with my name on top. Um, I'll go ahead and make a jig that has the box top flush with the surface. I've have my grid tape out. The machine already knows it. I've got my signature stored in there. I can take my shape or put it there, pull up my design, and just go to town, and it'll be in the same spot every single time.
Okay, cool. So you leave the tape up on the outside of the jig,
Right,
and that keeps it oriented in the right place. That's
right.
really, really, that's very ingenious. So,
It is, but there is one. You have to be careful about cutting your tape too. So
uh,
if you remove all your reference points, then you can start to get lost. But it does stop, and it'll say, "Hey, we need more reference points. You can put down more tape, add to your scan, and continue going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. And so yes, so then can you input it into you can put it into a file like uh I don't know what the file STL or
It's
thing.
a DXF, I believe. I use Fusion 360, and they've got
Okay.
a built-in plugin for that.
Okay.
And when you want to send it to Shaper, you could. I think you can do it over the air. This is version 2. I haven't played with it yet. We just got it in the other day.
Okay.
Um, or you can bring in the file with a USB stick, but it goes ahead and sets that file up for you directly out of Fusion.
Okay. But I'm
You
sure
could also,
there's some must have some standard, suffix file form that
I believe it's a DXF.
okay.
Um, I'm almost 100% sure it's a DXF.
Okay. Um, and so you take your file and you put it in there, and then so the way I understand that it works is that instead of having a bunch of two axes and step motors moving the router where it wants to go, your hands are moving the router. You're kind of following something. Are you looking at the screen to follow where you're going? Or
So
what's happening there?
yes, so once you import your file to the
Yeah.
machine, there's also you can design files directly on this machine.
Okay.
So you can go ahead and put a circle down, a square down. You can draw a line from 2 points and connect it. So you can
Mhm.
do a lot physically on the machine. So once you have your design, uh, it projects it down onto the surface. So you kind of see what it looks like. And you're following a bunch of marching ants with this tool.
Wait, you say it actually projects it onto it, or
Not
virtually through?
virtually projects it through the screen.
Okay, yeah.
And it's got a bunch of marching ants that you follow. It'll show you a feed direction that you should
Right,
follow
right.
these lines in. And you wouldn't go as fast as you would with a normal router, but you can go at a decent speed. You follow those marching ants as best as you can. And then the router is on a X and Y axes rails where
Internally, yes.
it accounts for your errors
Right,
and makes the cut perfect. And if you happen to knock it or something, it auto retracts super quickly.
right, right,
So you have to try to cut something
right, right,
that
right,
you don't want to cut.
right,
It's possible, but if you go slow enough, you're going to get a really good, accurate cut.
right. Yeah, so it's sort of like, if you were a superhuman and you could just take your router and follow a line, you wouldn't need this, but humans are not like that. And so this
Right.
compensates for the natural variance in a human trying to do something by hand, follow a straight line, you can't really do it. But this constantly autocorrects.
Constantly autocorrects. It's pretty fun to watch it autocorrect.
Right.
It's there's no other tool kind of like it that autocorrects your
A
errors
segue.
as you go. A segue. Okay, yeah, that autocorrects you. So yeah, that's amazing to be able to do that and cut such a large variety of
Yeah.
sizes.
And so what is kind of the thickness that we're talking about? I mean, you have laser cutters, which are
Right.
much less,
So
they're maybe about the same amount, but they're going a quarter of an inch.
right.
What's the maximum when you go here?
I believe you can cut an inch and a quarter. I don't know it off the top of my head. Definitely, I go through 3/4 inch plywood, an apple ply, which is a really dense plywood. It has no problem with a 1/4 inch bit
Uh-huh.
going through that. It takes a couple cuts.
Oh,
You
interesting.
reference the top, so it knows where the ground plane is, and then you can tell it, okay, with a 1/4 inch bit, you want to go about 1/8 of an inch. You don't want to push it too much. So it's a lot of multiple cuts.
Eighth inch deep each pass.
Yeah,
So for 3/4, that's a lot of passes.
it's a lot of passes. You can push it a little more. But if you're doing a full plunge cut, it's nice to be able to let the bit breathe a little bit and have a way to evacuate the chips without burning up the bit. Another thing is if you want to go and take a more aggressive cut right away, you can do so and then come back and then offset that cut slightly. So if it does have a little problem, you can go ahead and do a final cut that's exactly on your line.
You say offset.
So say I wanted to follow my line, I can say offset this by a 1/16 of an inch.
Oh,
so
you,
it
you mean
leaves
like make a little wide, so
right.
you're proud
So
by that much.
right. So give
And then-
1/16 of an inch of space between the bit and where you want your final cut to be. And then your last cut, you can do a full 3/4 inch, take off that 1/16 of an inch thick
right.
piece of material all the way around, and that won't give the bit any issue.
And you can actually tell it to then to remove the offset.
Right.
Ah, okay, I see.
And you can offset as much as you want with this thing. So if I wanted to make a bunch of circles, I would use the offset for that. So I can cut one circle and say offset it by an inch, and then I can cut another one and another one. So you can start to make interesting patterns that way too.
Right, right. Okay. Cool. So
And
that's
it's super intuitive too to use.
mhm.
It's all from the top to the bottom of the what steps you have to
Right,
take.
right,
It's start, stop button,
right.
and that's it. It walks you through it.
Can you reuse the tape?
So once you remove it, it's not very reusable.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not that cheap. I think it's about $20 for 150 feet. I
Uh-huh.
don't know exactly off the top of my head.
Right, right, right.
But that 150 feet does go a long way. And the way you can reuse it is if you put it on a jig that you're using, for instance,
Right.
the engraving on top of the box.
Right, right. Okay, that's a fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic tool. And you said it's around 3,000 now?
It's around $3,000 now. Yep. And there's a bunch of different attachments you can get. There's a workstation for it, which it has that grid integrated into the station, so you don't have to worry about tape. And then has a way where you can clamp pieces vertically, horizontally, you name it, and put different pieces in.
That's for doing smaller things.
For doing smaller things, or if you say you have a curved leg and you want to put a mortise and tenon joint there, you could cut that in this jig because you can clamp it onto, it's got like a T-track system on the side of it.
Okay.
And so it could reference, it's got a sliding rail and your surface and then a gap in there. So you can do cuts on planes that aren't flat.
Okay.
Or if you wanted to take, make a box with dovetails, you can cut those dovetails where you wouldn't be able to reference the end of the piece of wood with such a big machine. So you can go ahead, clamp it in, and you can cut your dovetails out of it.
With a dovetail bit.
With a dovetail bit, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's really, really great. Thank you. You just mentioned apple ply, which I had not heard about. I knew birch, bolted birch ply, but apple is made from apple wood?
No, it's maple. I don't know why it's called apple ply, but it's a really high-end grade plywood. There's 13 layers of veneers in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a super stable piece of ply.
Mm-hmm.
It won't cup on you, such as like the CDX at a Home Depot or something like that.
How is it compared to like a bolted birch ply?
So Baltic birch, they tend to have thinner veneers on the exterior. This has a pretty hefty veneer, and it's doesn't tend to chip up as much as the Baltic birch.
Mm-hmm.
Baltic birch is great. I would totally use it for making cabinets, but I would say the apple ply is more of a furniture grade plywood, or if you wanted to make jigs that will last a very long time, apple ply is the way to go. It's not cheap. It's super heavy. It's well over 100 pounds a sheet.
Like a 4x8
Yeah,
sheet, you mean?
4x8 sheet. Yep.
Wow. Wow. That's insane. Um, and where would one get apple pie?
You can get it at hardwood lumber stores.
Okay.
You don't find it at your normal box stores like Home
No,
Depot
no,
or Lowe's.
you don't.
Um,
But you have to special order it?
uh, no, not really. There's a couple places in the Bay Area where you can just go and pick it up. Um, it's it's pretty common in the furniture world.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't have to go on a big scavenger hunt to try to find it.
Okay. Interesting. Um, well, thanks. This is really, really great. So Asa, do you have something you want to share with the audience here? If you have something you're working on, something that you want them to know about, something that
Oh, I'm currently on paternity leave. I have a 10-month-old daughter, so I'm taking a couple of weeks off to be able to spend some time with her. But when I get back into the shop, I've got a Japanese inspired outdoor bench that I'm going to be making,
huh?
which I'm pretty excited about. Um, it's got a bunch of traditional joinery, and given it's going to be an outdoor bench, it's also going up to Seattle, so you have a lot of weather
Uh-huh.
change and moisture. So it's going to be a fun build to be able to uh, make it so it can move
Right.
appropriately with the changes of season
Right. And
being
so
outside.
what kind of wood would you make it for an outside bench like that?
So for an outside bench, mahogany is a great choice. Super dense, and it holds up to weather. Uh, Wait, not mahogany. Sorry, teak.
Geez.
Super dense, holds up to weather. Um, so that would be my first one. Uh, Cedar is another option, but it's not very durable. So for this particular one, I'll be using teak.
Right. Yeah. Teak is what they make ship decks often out of, if I
Yep,
recall.
yep. It's super dense. It's very oily.
Right.
So before you glue your joints together, tend to wipe it off with a little bit of denatured alcohol to remove some of the surface oils.
Uh-huh. Cool.
But that helps with the weather as well.
Right, right. Well, great. This is really wonderful. Thank you for taking time. I really appreciate it. I know we could probably go on for hours with all the other things that you have in your shop that we probably don't know about, but maybe we'll come back again in the
Maybe.
future. I appreciate your time and sharing with us.
It's great talking to you. Thank you.
This year, our Cool Tools blog will be 20 years old, which means we've been posting something new every day for 20 years. It's only possible because of the very engaged and knowledgeable readers and listeners like yourself. You've kept this place going, and we are very grateful for you. With this idea of 20 years in mind, we decided to try an experiment this year, and I'm inviting our guests and listeners to join me on our Cool Tool Show and Tell, which is the program that you're listening to right now. So if you feel you'd make a good guest on this podcast and have 4 uncommon tools that you'd like to share with us, please sign up on our form on the website, and we'll see about inviting you. You must be comfortable talking on a video, and you need to have some tools that you can show. We record on, as you know, on Zoom. We do a YouTube version, a video version of it, as well as an audible version. Fill out the form if you're interested, and list your four cool tools, and we'll see if there's a good fit. The applications aren't guaranteed in any way, and we're looking at tools that are new to us and appropriate tools, and whether the times will work for you. So we're really interested in hearing from people all over the world, not just in the US, although the tools have to be available online, easily available online. And If you are a longtime listener, you kind of know what the definition of our tools are. They're very broad. They can be anything that's handy, from something in the kitchen to something you use to travel, to a workshop, to something professional that we may not know about. We're really interested in things that we don't know anything about. So this is an open invitation. We'll give it a try. If you think you make a good guest for this podcast, fill out the form. There'll be a link somewhere on our website. And we look forward to chatting with you. Thank you.